Start. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm Sara Frost, Naturetrek's Marketing Manager. I work in the head office here in Hampshire, and I have a background in marine biology, and I specialize in leading our wildlife cruises. And I'm sure I've seen many of you here on the roadshows before. There's lots of familiar names here, so a very warm welcome from me and from the fish as well. But delighted to be back on the big screen. And they were most eager to join the webinar this evening when they heard what tonight's topic was all about, because tonight I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Chaz Anderson, who is a professional tropical marine biologist. Now, we've been working with Chaz for over 15 years, operating private wildlife cruises in the Maldives and across other tropical regions. Chaz has lived and worked in the Maldives for much of his career and is widely regarded as the foremost authority on whales, dolphins, and reef fishes of the region. He's also the pioneer of whale and dolphin watching in the Maldives and has authored numerous books and scientific papers on tropical marine life, and his many accolades include being an accomplished underwater photographer, rediscovering Longman's beaked whale, maintaining the national bird list for the Maldives, giving a prestigious TED talk on dragonfly migration, and leading the research that identified the blue whale hotspot in southern Sri Lanka. So I've been privileged to guide 14 cruises with Chaz in both the Maldives and in Indonesia, and we've only just returned from our most recent expedition to the Solomon Islands 10 days ago. So on a dark winter's evening like this, there's really no better place to be transported to than the tropics. So I hope you're sitting comfortably with a drink and some nibbles. Chaz will be speaking for the next hour, so if you have any questions along the way, please do just pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If there are quick ones that I can answer, then I'll do so, but we'll likely leave most of them to the end. So without any further ado, Chaz, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Oh, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this evening's webinar, which, as Sarah said, looking at tropical marine wildlife and wildlife cruises in Maldives and Indonesia in particular. So thanks very much for that introduction, Sarah. Yes, I've worked for most of my professional life as a marine biologist, based mainly in the Maldives, but working also in across the tropical Indian Ocean and into the Western Pacific. And I have indeed been working with Naturetrek for over 15 years now, organizing and running leading trips, particularly in Maldives and Indonesia, which is the subject of this evening's talk. So here we are, a wide swathe of tropical ocean, right across the tropical Indian Ocean and into the Western Pacific. And this, if you like, is my backyard. This is my local patch. It's rather a greedy take on a local patch, but right across this region, right across the Indo-West Pacific, it's one biogeographical realm. So the marine life is there are differences from one side to the other, but there are enormous similarities. So having studied the marine life in the Maldives in particular, and I think we can highlight the Maldives here, that has given me an understanding, if you like, of much of the marine life across this enormous region. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the Maldives, but also about Indonesia, and in particular about a group of islands within Indonesia known as the Raja Ampat Islands, which are just off the western tip of the great island of Papua New Guinea there. I'll come back to that shortly. But first of all, the Maldives. I'm sure many of you perhaps have been there. Many of you will know something about it. And the country is made up entirely of these small, beautiful tropical islands, sandbanks, vegetated sandbanks. And they are just as nice as the holiday brochures would have you believe. Here's my wife, Susan, enjoying a stroll around one of the islands. And there are over 1,200 of these islands scattered across over 500 miles of ocean. It really is a wonderful place to visit. It has, of course, a reputation for honeymoons and luxury holidays, but there's an awful lot of wildlife there as well, some fantastic marine wildlife. And of course, the best way to get around a group of islands, an archipelago like the Maldives, is by boat. And this is the boat we use with Naturetrek, the wonderful Kiana, very nicely appointed vessel, nice cabins, nice food, too much food, great crew, a very nice vessel to travel around in. The cabins, quite spacious, simple but spacious, air conditioned, well ventilated. Plenty of areas for sitting out. There are different levels you can sit out on to look out. Here's the forward shaded deck. There's plenty of room on top as well, shaded and unshaded, for getting good looks of seabirds and cetaceans. It's also a nice venue for giving talks in the evenings and actually stargazing as well. But the vessel itself, ideal for getting out in amongst the atolls, looking out for whales and dolphins. And here we have a group of bottlenose dolphins, common bottlenose dolphins, bow riding in front of Guyana. Many species will come alongside. We position the boat. The crew are quite experienced now in changing the speed and direction of the boat to not disturb the animals, to glide alongside them. And here we have some pilot whales, the tropical species, the short-fin pilot whale, right up alongside the Guyana. And in fact, the name pilot whale is believed to come from the habit of pilot whales of riding alongside slow-moving vessels, as if they're guiding them, as if they are piloting them. And on calm days, when you're looking down, this is a picture taken from the bows, looking down. On the right there, that's me with the hat on, looking down on two pilot whales gliding alongside. Very nice too. And we spend a lot of time looking at them, but they're intelligent creatures, and they are curious about us, and they will spend time looking at us too. So if they're in the mood, if they're not traveling, if they've got time on their hands, lolling about, logging, socializing, then they will stop and look out. They'll lift their heads out of the water, spy hopping, and give us a look. And they have these great bulbous heads. The scientific name for the pilot whales, the two species of pilot whale, is globicephala, globe head, with big bulbous heads. The melon is full of oil related to involved in the propagation of sound and echolocation. Means they can't always see both sides, so they'll turn their head to one side to get a good look at us as we are looking at them. Now, pilot whales are deep diving animals. They feed at night. They're nocturnal. They feed at night on squid. And as you will know, in the ocean, particularly in the tropical ocean, there's a huge vertical migration of plankton, small fishes, small squids, and other things that move up and down in the water column. At night, they go down deep, where it's dark, to avoid the attentions of tropical predators like tunas. But all the food is generated at the surface. So they have to come up to the surface at some point, and they come up to the surface at night when the tunas can't see them. But of course, cetaceans, the toothed whales, can echolocate and can hunt at night. So many species, like the pilot whale, hunt particularly at night, and they're hunting on squid that are following the plankton and small fish up and down. So at night, they come up towards the surface, and the pilot whales only have to dive tens or just a couple of 100 meters to feed, rather than many hundreds of meters during the daytime. But there are some species that can dive many hundreds of meters and do so. And here we have an example. These are beaked whales. They're actually Cuvier's beaked whales. And there was a bit of hanky-panky going on. There was 6 or 7 individuals cavorting at the surface, ignoring us, so we were able to get some very nice views. But beaked whales are animals of deep water. They, as I say, they dive hundreds of meters day and night after squid. Again, they feed at squid, on squid, and during the daytime, they can dive hundreds of meters. So in most parts of the world, you don't see them because to get that sort of depth, you've got to go a long way offshore. But in the Maldives, the coral reef atolls come steeply up from the bottom of the ocean. So 100 meters depth is just 100 meters offshore. And so we can sometimes see beaked whales very close to shore. And here we have a luxury resort in the Maldives with some rather fine water bungalows looking out over the ocean, and beaked whales cavorting just outside. I'm sure the occupants of these particular water bungalows had a very nice time, but I doubt if they saw this, which is a shame. So Cuvier's beaked whale. There are 4 species of beaked whale known to occur in the Maldives. Cuvier's gets up to 20-25 foot long, big chunky beast. But all of the beaked whales, they have a beak, which gives them their name, and they all dive deep after squid. And the one we see most often, other than Cuvier's, is this fellow, a rather splendid beast, and this is Blainville's beaked whale, also known as the dense beaked whale, because the beak of the male is packed with particularly dense bone. It's more dense than ivory. It is the densest material produced by any animal. And this is like a truncheon, and the males will whack each other. And the males have two teeth that erupt up from the sides here. And in this particular case, on the top of the teeth, where the tip of the tooth emerges, there's a sharp point. It's a little bit of hard real estate out in the ocean, and things settle on it and grow on it. Barnacles. There's a particular type of barnacle that specializes in growing on the exposed teeth of beaked whales. It's a rather niche occupation. So these fierce animals, and you can see on the back of the animal here, scratches, grooves, because the males fight each other. They go head to head, and they whack each other with their teeth. So these are fierce bulls, fierce fighting bulls, about 15 foot long or plus, massively powerful animals, armed with these great tusks, but with little pom-poms attached to the top, so which rather diminishes the effect in some ways. The females, not scratched, and they still have the long beak, but the tooth doesn't erupt. So there's a big space where there would be a tooth, but not actually erupting in the case of the female. So this is a female dense beaked whale. And as I say, in most parts of the world, beaked whales are rather difficult to see. They live many miles, sometimes hundreds of miles offshore. But in Maldives, because the deep water is just there, this is undoubtedly one of the best places in the world to see beaked whales. Not always easy. They dive deep. They dive for a long time. So there's a lot of hanging around and waiting. But occasionally we get these fantastic views, well worth waiting for. There are other species out there also diving for squid. There's a lot of squid out in the deep tropical ocean. And this is another type of cetacean we see quite often. This is a dwarf sperm whale. So related to the sperm whale, but different and dwarf. Yeah, it only gets up to about 8 foot long, so 2.5 meters or so long. And they lie at the surface. They're air-breathing mammals, of course. They come to the surface, they log at the surface, breathing, and then they're gone. And they dive deep after squid, forage around for 20, 30, 40 minutes, come up again, lie at the surface quietly, breathe, and gone. And that's all we see. They don't actually do very much at the surface. I presume they do quite a lot underwater, but we don't see it. And they're very shy, presumably quite vulnerable to predation by big sharks or big predators like force killer whales or killer whales. So their modus operandi is keep quiet and keep out of trouble, which means that when we turn up in our rather noisy boat, noisy, not very noisy for us, but presumably quite noisy for them, they hear us and they just disappear. So this is, I'd like to say, a world-class picture of dwarf sperm whale. But very occasionally, they do come a bit closer, and we can get a much nicer view of them, often likened to an upside-down surfboard, with the scale of the surfboard being the dorsal fin. So dwarf sperm whale. In fact, this is particularly common in the Maldives. When it's calm, when it's rough, we can't see them, but when it's calm, 1 in 6 sightings we have is of a dwarf sperm whale. So not uncommon at all. Many other species occurring in the Maldives of whales and dolphins. This splendid fellow is a striped dolphin, of course. Very active, very acrobatic, very energetic. Charging through the water, they'll come charging up to our boat, hoping to bow ride, and we're chugging along at a relatively slow speed. They soon get bored and zip off. But when they do come in and have their first look, wonderful to see them. And I'm not sure if it shows too well, but you can perhaps make out a little bit of pink on the belly. And this is not pigment, this is because they're flushed. It's warm tropical water. The animals are warm-blooded mammals. They're charging around, getting warm. They don't sweat, they don't pant. The only thing they can do is shunt blood into their skin to radiate heat. And on the back, where they're heavily pigmented to protect themselves from the tropical sun, you can't see that. But on the belly, they glow a rather nice, gentle pink. Several other species, well, many other species of dolphins in the Maldives. Here's another, actually, this is another squid eater. This is Risso's dolphin, named for a French naturalist who worked in the Mediterranean 200 years ago. Very distinctive, tall, narrow dorsal fin, rounded head, and scratched. The males, actually all Rissos, have a relatively few teeth, half a dozen or so teeth, quite stout. And they use these, the males use these to fight each other. And where they scratch each other, the scratches heal, but turn white. And over time, they build up a pattern of these white scratches. becoming almost beluga-like. So here in the foreground, you can see a rather white animal. That'll be a male. And to the left, a bit further away, only slightly scratched individual, probably a female. And just behind the male, tail sticking up. And that might look like an animal that's been at the surface and is diving down, is fluking down, but it's not. It's an animal that's been in the water and has come out backwards. And this behavior, lifting the tail up like this, is really rather common in the Maldives and indeed several other places. No one knows what it's about. No one has yet worked out what's going on, but a very distinctive bit of behavior. And you can see this with binoculars 2, 3, 4 miles away. And then you know it's going to be a Risso's dolphin. Again, a very common species in the Maldives, where the steep slopes drop down quickly. There's a lot of productivity, upwellings, a lot of food, a lot of squid. These feed on squid as well. And that's where we find them in good numbers. One other species I'll mention from the Maldives, one of the cetacean species I'll mention from the Maldives, this speedy fellow, spinner dolphins. Spinner dolphins are the super abundant, common, and gorgeous little dolphins of the tropical Indo-West Pacific. Rather small in the tropics where it's warm. You don't want to be too big because there's a lot of mass and a lot of heat being produced. Pays to be a little bit smaller. And in our part of the world, Maldives and Indonesia, they get up to about 1.5, 1.6 meters, so 5, maybe 6 foot long. Would be a big one. Beautiful, long-snouted animals. These have a particularly long snout because they need a long snout to fit all their teeth in. They have about 200 little teeth. And they need those because they feed on small fishes, which they catch one by one. Again, feeding at night. They wait for the food to come up to them. Then they can dive down a few tens of meters, echolocate on their food, zip in and snaffle the fishes one by one. And if you're going to eat small fishes whole, it helps if you swallow them head first. You don't want to swallow them sideways or backwards because they'll get stuck in your throat. So they swallow them head first. And to do that helps if you have lots of little teeth to manipulate your food and make sure it goes down the right way. So the long snouted spinner dolphin. And of course, they spin. They get their name from this habit of jumping out of the water and spinning, rotating more than 360 degrees on the long axis. And it does look fantastic thing to be able to do. I'd love to be able to do that. But the question is always asked, why do they do it? Well, in the case of youngsters, they seem to be playing and enjoying themselves. In the case of adults, there must be a lot of energy being expended. So that you'd think there's got to be some practical function. And the main reason, there may be more than one reason, the main reason may be to try and dislodge external parasites, suckerfish, remoras. I'm not sure if you can see this too well, but this poor spinner dolphin, he's got a rather large remora stuck on his head. And the remoras can move around. They can sit over your eye. They might sit over your blowhole. In any case, it can't be very comfortable having it sitting there. So it's been calculated, estimated by jumping out of the water and spinning. If you catch the little fellow unawares, they can exert up to 7 times the acceleration due to gravity and try and throw it off. And suckerfish, of course, remoras, they have on the top of their head this sticky pad. It's like a cross between a Brillo pad and a gecko's fingerprint. It's very good at sticking on. And here's a spinner dolphin who had one earlier. And you can see a little footprint on his side there, where a smaller remora has been stuck on. Definitely well. Dolphins have very sensitive skin. It really can't be very comfortable having these things stuck on. So by jumping out, spinning, they hope to dislodge him. We often think of dolphins as altruistic animals, so why doesn't his mate come along or his mum or something and poke the remora off? Because whoever pokes the remora off is going to get the remora stuck on them. So it's down to the individual to try and dislodge it. So whales and dolphins, I've just a handful of species there. There are many more species in the Maldives, but I'm going to cover some of the other creatures we can see. Birds. I have to say, birds is, as Sarah mentioned, I do keep the national bird list of the Maldives. And Maldives is not the place to go if you are a huge birder. You're not going to come away with a big list of birds from the Maldives. Many interesting species, but not a great number of species. Some seabirds occurring in good numbers. Several species of seabird breeding in good numbers in the Maldives. I'll just mention a couple. This is the black-naped tern. Probably the commonest breeding seabird in the Maldives. Beautiful creature, gorgeous black and white plumage. And they breed on small uninhabited islands just up above the high tide mark, between the high tide mark and the start of the vegetation in the open. And they will lay one or typically two eggs out in the open. Just the female would just shuffle her thumb and just make a little depression in the sand, a saucer-like depression in the sand, lay two well camouflaged eggs there, which hatch out as beautifully camouflaged chicks. And then they feed them on small fish until they grow and fledge. And in the past, historically, with 1,200 islands in the Maldives, roughly 200 inhabited, leaving 1,000 uninhabited, occasionally visited by local people, fishermen to collect firewood or other things. So some disturbance, but a lot of undisturbed, uninhabited islands. These days, with a much greater population, more mobile population, and a lot more tourists, of course, rather few undisturbed islands. So there have been some disturbance to the nesting of black-necked terns has caused the population to decrease. Until recently, when new islands have been developed and actually sandbars have been put aside and areas have been put aside for black-necked terns to nest. So numbers seem to be bouncing back, which is rather nice. Another emblematic species, if you like, of the Maldives is this fellow. This is the tropical shearwater. It's a bit like a Manx shearwater. It's a distinct species, occurs in the Maldives and Seychelles, so the tropical Western Indian Ocean. And he doesn't go too far. Some of these shearwaters migrate enormous distances, but this is a bit of a homebody and stays around the atolls of the Maldives. So a rather nice one to see out and about on our trips. Now, the other great thing to wildlife spectacle in the Maldives, if you like, we'll talk a little bit about stations, a little bit about seabirds, is actually underwater. The diving and the snorkeling in the Maldives is quite extraordinary and very easy. The waters are warm and clear. And then on the boat we use, Diana has a support boat of this type. This is a converted fishing boat. It's called a Doni, and we use this for our island and snorkeling excursions. It has a big, hefty ladder, so very easy to get in and out. And the snorkeling is fantastic. Very nice corals. It's patchy in some places, but most places are very nice corals indeed. Some superb table corals. And actually, when we think about the reefs, this in some ways it maybe looks a bit dull. Look at the color isn't too exciting, rather dull khaki color. This is actually the color of the photosynthetic algae that live inside the tissues of the living coral. So this is actually the color of a fantastic, healthy, growing, thriving coral reef. But to us, color-wise, it looks rather dull. But in terms of the textures and the architecture of the reef, fabulous, fabulous. The colors are, for the most part, imparted by the other creatures of the reef, particularly the fishes. And as Sarah mentioned, I also keep the list of fishes in the Maldives, well over 1,200 species. And this is one of the better known ones because this is the Maldive clownfish, or the Maldive anemone fish, found only in the Maldives and a couple of other places. It occurs in the Laccadive Islands and in small numbers in Sri Lanka as well. But in good numbers in the Maldives. A beautiful, brightly colored creature. And it's the fishes and the other invertebrates that give the coral reef their fantastic color and vibrancy. Other creatures on the reef, octopus is pretty common. We see quite a few octopus. I know a lot of people rather like octopus. This is the same individual. Just a couple of seconds later, as you'll know, they can change color and texture very rapidly indeed as they move around the reef. And this one is actually hunting. And here you can see the tentacles, and they actually spread out. They have a bit of a membrane between the tentacles. They spread out trying to catch things under there. And there's a grouper there, a blue-spotted grouper, Cephalophilus argus, lurking nearby, hoping to catch something that tries to escape from the octopus into the jaws of the grouper. This is quite a common partnership. We can see this quite frequently. Other creatures on and around the reef, manta rays. Maldives is particularly renowned for mantas. It has the largest known population of reef mantas anywhere in the world, largest documented population. On the underside, there are spots, and these the spotting is rather like a fingerprint. It's individual, and a couple of databases of mantas in the Maldives, over 10,000 individuals, quite extraordinary population size in the Maldives. Related to the rays, the sharks, nurse sharks, these are harmless creatures that feed on mollusks, on shells on the reef, again, occur in good numbers, very large numbers of nurse sharks in and around the reefs of the Maldives. And then stepping up a size, whale sharks too are not uncommon. And there are one or two places where you can go and you can see them during the day, but at night on the Oceania, we have a bright light, which we put over the back, and that attracts plankton and small fishes and things come. And so it's quite nice to go down onto the stern deck in the evening and see all these little things coming up. But sometimes bigger things come, mantas come up, but whale sharks as well. There's one or two places we go where whale sharks come up quite regularly. And it's very nice to see these off the stern of the vessel. And indeed, if conditions are good, to get in and get closer. So that was just a very quick taste of some of the things we see and do on our Naturetrek trips, marine wildlife cruises in the Maldives. I'm going to move on now and talk about a second destination, which is Indonesia. And Indonesia, again, I'm sure some of you have been there. Many of you, I'm sure you know where Indonesia is. But it's part of Southeast Asia, between the rest of Asia and Australia, and is an enormous archipelago. It really is an extraordinarily large country. Depending on who does the counting and the state of the tide and which way the wind's blowing, people come up with different numbers of islands. But 17,000 islands is a figure that's generally bandied about. So an enormous archipelago. Several of the largest islands in the world are here. Sumatra, of course, Borneo, New Guinea, half of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea. And from one side, from tip of Banda Aceh on the tip of Sumatra on one side, all the way across to the border with Papua New Guinea on the other side, it's 3,000 miles. 3,000 miles. That's close to the distance across the Atlantic. It's the distance from London to Moscow and back again. It is an extraordinarily large country. So when we go on our wildlife cruises in Indonesia, we have a map here, and our week or 2 week trips are 1 inch in the middle. I'll mention just a couple. We do regular trips to Komodo, which is circled here. And in addition to all the normal marine wildlife, the snorkeling, the whales and dolphins, the attraction of Komodo dragons, which are quite splendid beasts. Then also in the Banda Sea, which is a big swathe of ocean in the east of Indonesia, at certain times of the year. This is home to particularly large numbers of blue whales. There's a migratory population of blue whales that spends the southern winter in the Banda Sea, and good numbers, very good numbers there. But I'm going to talk tonight about another trip up in the northeast of Indonesia, and circled here is the tip of Sulawesi, that spider-shaped island, Sulawesi, and the port of Bitung is there. And the trip we were running in just a few months' time goes from Sulawesi to Raja Ampat. Again, I mentioned it just now, but off the tip of Papua there. And actually, I'm going to mention one of the spots down here. There's an island down there, Christmas Island, which is not part of Indonesia. Politically, it belongs to Australia. And I'm just going to mention it now as I've got the map up, because some birds occur there which migrate up into Indonesian waters. But I'm talking about a trip which we're running in February, March, from Sulawesi across to Raja Ampat, spending quite a bit of time in Raja Ampat itself. And the vessel we use, a splendid vessel, the Mermaid 1, steel-hulled, very solid, good expedition ship. Well, she is an expedition ship, but she's a very comfortable expedition ship indeed. Very nicely appointed cabins, nice public areas, very well looked after. The crew, I have to say, are excellent. And again, far too much good food, which, yes, well, we all tend to rather overindulge, but very nice indeed. And importantly, nice shaded seating areas on the main deck here, and also on the upper deck. Plenty of room to sit and look out for whales, dolphins, seabirds. Now, the cruise I'm talking about is coming up in a few weeks' time. Starts in Sulawesi. Fantastic snorkeling around there. And this is a particular type of cardinal fish, the Banggai cardinal fish. It's only a wee fella, but he's unique to this area. He's endemic to this area. So this is a rather special thing there. And also, just near the port of Bitung, where we start from, is the renowned Tangkoko National Park. Plenty of splendid tropical wildlife, birds and wildlife. One of the features, one of the animals people particularly look out for is this fellow, splendid black macaque, or crested macaque, which is endemic to this part of Sulawesi. Now, the first Western scientist to go, many people go there now, but the first Western scientist to go there and to study the fauna of this area was another hirsute mammal, Alfred Russel Wallace, the famous Victorian naturalist who, among other things, renowned as the co-discoverer of the process of evolution by natural selection. But as a young man in his 30s, he traveled for 8 years through what he called the Malay archipelago. He spent quite a bit of time in Sulawesi, and in fact, he based himself on an island nearby, Ternate, really not far from Bitung, and used that as a base to go out on many, many trips, exploratory trips, collecting and studying throughout, as I say, what he called the Malay archipelago, Indonesia. And he is remembered as the first Western scientist to study in Tangkoko, what is now Tangkoko National Park. And just recently, just after COVID, or just before COVID, a memorial statue was unveiled in Tangkoko National Park, actually to mark the bicentenary of his birth. He was born in, the centenary of his death. He died in 1913. He was born in 1823. So the centenary of his death and the bicentenary of his birth, relatively close together, and with a bit of bureaucratic delay, this sort of came conveniently. The unveiling of this statue came conveniently in the middle. So a rather splendid statue of Alfred Russel Wallace there in Tangkoko National Park, which can be visited from Bitung at the start of the voyage to Raja Ampat. Now, a little bit of a technical map here. Sulawesi there in the middle, the black spider-shaped island right in the middle, and we voyaged from there across towards New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, through an area known as Wallacea, named after Alfred Russel Wallace. And I'm sure many of you are familiar, but he was the first person who realized there was a sharp divide between the fauna of Southeast Asia and Asia generally on one side, and Australasia on the other. Very different faunas. And he came to this realization when he was on Bali, and from Bali he went across to Lombok. Sorry, I can't. No, I can't. Oh, can I? Yeah, here. I'm not sure if you can see that. There's a pointer here. Bali and Lombok, very close together, just 20 miles apart, the same distance as the English Channel. But on one side, the fauna is Asian, and on the other side, some Asian, but a lot of Australasian. And he realized there was a division between the two faunas, and he drew a line marking the point. That's now recognized as the western boundary of actually a zone of overlap. And that zone of overlap between the two faunas is known as Wallacea in his honor. And we will be sailing across Wallacea on this particular voyage. I'll just put up one. Wallace, of course, discovered many new species of birds, insects, butterflies, beetles. But this one is known as the Wallacean drongo. It's recently been split into a number of island species, but as a group, this is the Wallacean drongo, a rather splendid bird from Wallacea. But I want to talk mainly about seabirds as we're voyaging across Wallacea from island to island. Many tropical seabirds, lots of terns, different species of terns, a great crested tern and a black noddy. Boobies, tropical boobies, which are tropical gannets in good numbers. Red-footed boobies and brown boobies are the two common ones occurring in good numbers. And all these species, these terns and these boobies, they nest in Indonesia on remote islands. So, for example, here this is Nusa Kode down in the south, and on here you can see on the cliff a little bit close white specks. This is where the brown boobies nest. This is their guano-marked breeding ledges here. But there's another species of booby, which we're always on the lookout for, a much rarer species. It's actually an endangered species. This is Abbott's booby, which nests only on Christmas Island. Remember I showed the island down off the southwest of Indonesia that belongs to Australia. That is only nesting place in the world of Abbott's booby. But during the non-breeding season, they migrate up mostly into Indonesian waters, and we see them quite frequently. Here's a recently published chart showing the known distribution of Abbott's booby. The pink is a general area of distribution calculated from data loggers, putting little data recorders, little recording devices on the legs of breeding Abbott's boobies. Off they go, and 6 months later they come back to breed again, take the little loggers off and see where they've been. And this summarizes about 23 different birds that travel. So a lot of them traveling up into the Banda Sea, that same area, highly productive area where the blue whales go as well. Many of these dots, incidentally, from our trips, Naturetrek trips. The one from the Maldives, that's one of our trips. Many of the blue spots there are, blue triangles are records from Naturetrek trips. So wildlife travel can inform, increase understanding of the biology, distribution, behavior of, in this case, endangered species, and one hopes ultimately contribute towards their conservation. Other nice species, seabird species, beautiful tropic birds. This is the white-tailed tropic bird. This is the common form. There is actually a golden form, also known as the golden bosun bird, which again breeds on Christmas Island and migrates up into Indonesian waters during its non-breeding season. They're always on the lookout for tropic birds. These are solitary birds. There's often a lot of birds flying around, but these tend to be a bit solitary and they fly quite high. So, and they're very white. They shine in the sunlight. In fact, the scientific name for these is of the tropic birds generally, and there's another one here. This is the red-billed tropic bird. Sorry, red-tailed tropic bird. The scientific name is Phaeton, which is from Greek mythology. Was the son of Zeus, and he drove the chariot across the heavens and came to an untimely end. It shines like the sun in the sky. Again, offshore islands, which are little visited by people, as Manuk in the Banda Sea, hugely important as breeding grounds for these birds, the tropic birds, and also frigate birds. This is the male. That's a frigate bird, a greater frigate bird, and they will come and investigate the boat. They'll come very close. This is from just a few weeks ago, just around the mermaid, in good numbers. Other species too. Many of the species, so those are ones that breed in Indonesian tropical waters, but many species come from further afield. There's quite a few species that nest up in the North Pacific, or even further up in the high Arctic, the tundra, and migrate south in the northern winter. Bulwer's petrel that migrates down through Indonesian waters into the Indian Ocean. Skewers, Jaegers, this is the long-tailed skewer, again breeds up on the high Arctic tundra of Siberia, Alaska, and comes down into Indonesian waters. And in huge numbers, phalaropes, red-necked phalaropes, which breed again up on the high Arctic tundra and spend their winters down in the waters of Indonesia. These extraordinary animals, they're the size of a starling, and they spend their entire winter out at sea, pecking at little bits of food and plankton at the surface. And remarkably, there's a period of overlap between before these birds, before the phalaropes go back up north, southern winter is starting and southern seabirds start coming up. So there's a period of overlap in the spring and the autumn when northern birds and southern birds are in Indonesia at the same time. And the one to look out for is Wilson's storm petrel, which occurs in really quite large numbers during the southern winter. But there's an overlap where you can see both the far north and the far south birds together, which is rather splendid. Wilson's storm petrel, of course, is often said to be the most abundant seabird species in the world. It nests in the millions in the Antarctic, but flies up into tropical waters in the southern winter. Among other things, it has long the long legs and feet of the southern storm petrels, and it patters on the surface. And if you get a good enough look, you can see the webbing on his feet is actually yellow, which is characteristic of Wilson's storm petrel. Now, in addition to looking out for birds at sea, if you're traveling in Indonesia, the land birds are spectacular too. And with 17,000 islands, we don't have time to visit them all. In fact, we don't really have time to visit more than a very few. But some of the excursions we make ashore are quite, some of the birds we see on our excursions are quite extraordinary. And this, here we are, because actually Indonesia has the largest number of birds of any country in the old world. South America, of course, is known as the bird continent, and the big three countries, if I remember correctly, are Colombia, Peru, and Brazil are the three countries that have the largest number of bird species. But currently in fourth position is in Indonesia. And I suspect that might creep up because as more study goes in and looking at variations on different islands, many of the widespread species are being split into several island-specific taxa. The Wallacean drongo, which I mentioned, is being split up into island-specific taxa. And as that continues to happen, the number of species in Indonesia will continue to rise. So it may go up the rankings, but nevertheless, as it is as by far the largest number of bird species of any country in the old world, and some spectacular ones too. Some high up in the forests, and this is on the island of Waigeo in Raja Ampat itself, where we go ashore. On the right are two local guides, Melky and Benny, who are from the village at the bottom of the hill. Actually, Benny, the one with the light blue coat here. Here we are on the right. Benny Membrasa. His father was a hunter in the forest, and he grew up as a young boy, absorbing going out with his father and absorbing his knowledge, and he has become one of the best known bird guides in the region. Justifiably so. He's a very good bird guide. And up in the hills, some splendid birds, just a couple. Here's Papuan Pitta, gorgeous little fella. Actually, seeing him here, you think, how could you possibly miss him? But in the underneath the foliage, he actually blends in extraordinarily well, and he's not that easy to spot. But we do have a high success rate with him. And this splendid creature is Wilson's bird of paradise. Many people say this is the most extraordinary of all the birds of paradise. He's a small fellow, he's about the size of a blackbird. These extraordinary colours. He's got this bold blue, sky blue pate there. He's got bright yellow on his shoulders. He's got this beautiful crimson. He has these fantastic curled tail plumes, which mostly appear black, but when they catch the light, there's a silver violet color. He has a British racing green metallic gorget on his chest, and when he opens his mouth, it's all bright cream color inside. Quite extraordinary creature. And we make an excursion specifically to see these, and so far, touch wood, have always been successful. A wonderful creature. Incidentally, this bird has a rather unusual scientific name. Many of the birds of paradise and the more beautifully colored birds are named after well-known personalities, often royalty. Not so this one. Think of the King of Saxony bird of paradise, for example. Not so this one. The scientific name of this is Diphylodes, which refers to the two tail plumes, Diphylodes res publica, the Republican bird of paradise. It was named by a well-known French ornithologist in the 19th century, mid-19th century, 1850s-ish. A chap by the name of Bonaparte, Charles Bonaparte, who was the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. And he had very strong Republican ideals, so he wasn't going to name it after any royalty. The Republican bird of paradise. You may have heard of him. He's not so well known these days. In his day, he was one of the top ornithologists in the world. When the monarchy was, after the Napoleonic Wars, when the monarchy was restored in France, he left in disgust and emigrated to the United States and studied the ornithology of the United States. And if you've been to North America, you may well have come across Bonaparte's skull, which commemorates this great ornithologist. Also, on this voyage, we visit another group of islands, the Coffeeow Islands, Coffeeow Island, and there is a particular bird there, and this is the Coffeeow paradise kingfisher, only found on this island. And again, with a local guide, we're able to go into the forest and locate this beautiful, beautiful bird. Now, the islands of Raja Ampat, in fact, all of this swathe of ocean across Sulawesi, which we traverse on our voyage, surrounded by coral reefs, and we can go out on our little dinghies, zodiacs, and snorkel on the reefs. And the corals are absolutely fantastic. Raja Ampat, or East Indonesia in general, is located within what is known as the coral triangle. If we look at the distribution of coral species, the number of coral species across the world ocean, then east and west, not so many, but in the center of this map, the way it's centered here, is a roughly triangular area of ocean which has far more species of coral than anywhere else. This is known as the coral triangle. And Raja Ampat is right in the center. Raja Ampat is the epicenter of coral species diversity, and not just coral species, many other groups of tropical marine creatures have a similar distribution pattern. So Eastern Indonesia in general, and Raja Ampat in particular, astonishing numbers of corals and fishes and other species. Now, I have to say, whether there's 400 or 500 species of coral on a particular reef or series of reefs, most of us aren't going to know the difference. But there's a lot. There's an awful lot. Enormous diversity of shapes, textures, architecture. Fantastic. And they get big too. Ideal conditions for them to grow. And superb table corals and other species in Raja Ampat on the island of Misul. And huge diversity of other species too, cuttlefish and fishes, over 2,000, probably getting towards 3,000 species of reef fish within the region. Far too many to keep track of, really. Lionfishes, anemone fishes, clownfishes, many angelfishes, butterfly and angelfishes. This is the blue-girdled angelfish. Sweetlips, a whole family of sweetlips, many different species. Beautiful, beautiful creatures. And they're all just there, and they're used to people. So very easy to get very nice views of them. And then in the shallows, up in the mangroves, sometimes the mangroves come right down to the edge of the coral reef. So you can be snorkeling on the coral reef, and there's a mangrove just there. And in amongst the mangroves, very often, there are archerfish. These are the ones that squirt water and dislodge insects. Bigger things too, just a little bit off the reef, mantas, and in some places, whale sharks as well. Always nice to see the biggest fish in the sea. And the diversity, as I said, applies not only to the corals and the fishes, but to the other groups of marine life, the starfishes and their relatives. So these are the feather stars related to the starfishes, beautiful filter feeding starfishy-like animals. And smaller things too. And I particularly like the sea slugs or nudibranchs. These are small marine mollusks, slugs. So snails that have lost their shells, just as land slugs are land snails that have lost their shells. These are marine snails that have lost their shells. And they're toxic. They actually specialize in eating toxic things. They become toxic. And there's no point in being toxic if you don't let everybody know. If you're crawling around the reef looking like a nice tasty wine gum, and someone comes and eats you and then find out you're poisonous, it's not very good. So many of them have bright contrasting colors to advertise the fact that they are toxic. So brightly colored, slow moving, ideal for underwater photographers. So large numbers of books available for the sea slug aficionado. And I have to say, Raja Ampat, throughout this region, huge diversity of sea slugs, but Raja Ampat not only has great diversity, but for some reason has, we see far more sea slugs. Some of them are nocturnal, some of them are quite deep, so seen more by divers and snorkelers. But in Raja Ampat, within snorkeling depth, good numbers of fantastic, brightly colored sea slugs. So do look out for these. Bigger things, back to the bigger things, turtles, good abundance and diversity of turtles. This is green turtle, hawksbill turtle, then offshore, olive ridley turtles, and if you're very lucky, leatherback turtles. They do breed in this area, endangered now, not so many around, but we do see leatherback turtles, which is rather nice. And then back to the whales within the region. great diversity of cetaceans, but one particular to look out for is this baleen whale. This is Omura's whale. This is a species of whale that's in excess of 40 foot long, and it was unknown. It was undescribed until 2003. And even then, not much was known about it beyond its skeletal structure and a bit about its genetics. It wasn't until 2015 that the first scientific paper giving any information about its external appearance and biology ecology was published. 2015, it's only 10 years ago. This is an air-breathing mammal, 40 foot long, that occurs right around the globe. An air-breathing mammal, 40 foot long, which range encompasses the whole globe, essentially unknown 10 years ago, which gives some indication about how much we still have to learn about life in the ocean. It's Omura's whale. Mostly rather placid. We don't see too much of them, but occasionally they'll breach. And again, glowing pink in the warm tropical waters. There are other species of whale there too. Sperm whales. This is from a recent crossing on the Banda Sea. And dolphins in huge numbers. Spotted dolphins, very abundant. Fraser's dolphin, sometimes called Sarawak dolphin, because it's first described from a specimen from Sarawak in Malaysia, but common throughout this region. Beautiful, short-snouted, broadly striped animal. And they will bow right in numbers, in dozens, which is rather splendid. And then other species too, the so-called blackfish, melon-headed whales occur across here in big schools, dozens, hundreds together. And they're nocturnal. They spend the daytime just loafing about, logging, so we can get nice and close and have good looks at them. Again, they'll have a good look at us. And closely related to them, pygmy killer whales. Rather more elusive. They tend to move away from the boat, but very nice to see. There were false killer whales there, 20-foot long predators. And then, if you're very lucky, killer whales, which do occur in Maldives and Indonesia. Not hugely abundant in the tropics, but they are there. And they feed on a number of things. They feed on manta rays, they feed on big fishes, and they feed on dolphins. And these particular ones from earlier this year in Raja Ampat were hunting spinner dolphins. And here is a rather distressed young spinner dolphin, which they were hunting. And they were playing with it, toying with it, chasing it, coming up, snapping up behind it and letting it zigzag away, and then again and again and again. They seem to be, they had a youngster with them, young killer whale, and they seem to be training it in hunting techniques, how to hunt a dolphin. So they're all there. Plenty of things to be seen, and I think that's probably enough for a taster of some of the marine life, the whales, dolphins, seabirds, and reef creatures that we see in the Maldives and in eastern Indonesia. So thank you very much. Sarah, back to you.
Chaz, that was absolutely fabulous. Really, really fantastic. We've had a few questions come in, but I'm going to hold off just for 10 or 15 minutes until we get to those questions, because I'd really love just to hear a little bit more about the fantastic career that you have had working in the tropics. And I'm sure lots of other people would be keen to hear about it as well. So a few questions I wanted to ask you, if you could expand on some of the things you've talked about. Can you tell us a little bit more about your studies of blue whale migration through the Maldives that you've done?
Yes, sure. So yes, I've been very fortunate. I've enjoyed a very productive career as a marine biologist, based mainly in the Maldives. I was based in the Maldives for 35 years, and worked for the Maldivian government, for the Marine Research Centre in the Maldives for 15 years, and then privately since then. And during that time, saw within the Maldives saw blue whales, and I also keep with colleagues, Maldivian colleagues, national database of cetacean strandings. And we get quite a few strandings of blue whales, and the strandings and the sightings all occurred in quite a short period of time. There are two seasons, the monsoon seasons, and they're in one particular season. So if they're in the Maldives at a particular season, they've got to be somewhere else another season. So I was looking around for data from other parts of the region, trying to join the dots. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it looked like they ought to be migrating to and from Sri Lanka, east coast of Sri Lanka, passing around the southern tip of Sri Lanka. So with Sue, my wife, actually we were going to go in 2005. So they go past in December and back in April, and we were going to go in 2005 April, but of course the terrible tsunami of 2004 created havoc and great devastation and destruction in Sri Lanka. But we went in 2007, and went to the southernmost tip of Sri Lanka, Dondra Head. There's a lighthouse, actually a British built from colonial days, a British built lighthouse carved out of Scottish granite, shipped out to Sri Lanka's flat pack, IKEA type lighthouse, and assembled on site. Anyway, there's a lighthouse there on the southern tip. We went there and looked at, and within 10 minutes saw blue whales
Wow.
blowing offshore. And I mean, this is obviously well known to local fishermen, but they didn't think too much about it. But it's completely unknown to anyone outside. Extraordinary. It's a major hotspot of blue whales, the largest animal that has ever lived in numbers within sight of shore, completely unknown. Extraordinary. They were just there. Yeah.
Incredible discovery, which led to many years of people watching blue whales happily off Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's one of the top spots for watching blue whales in the world, and thousands of people have gone. It's brought enormous amounts of money, employment and money into the local community. So undoubtedly done many good things. I have to say, it's not very well controlled. It's probably expanded rather more than it should have done. Standards aren't quite as good as they maybe ought to be. But in terms of economic benefit it's brought to the local community, extraordinary.
Amazing. And Chaz, you were talking a little bit about nudibranchs. One of the things I quite like is flatworms, and you've made some rather fantastic discoveries in your career, one of which was discovering a new species of flatworm. Not only that, but I understand you named it after your wife.
I did.
At what point in your marriage do you decide it's a great idea to name a worm after your wife? I'm really intrigued as to how this conversation went at home. Please expand.
You've heard of the 7-year itch. Oh. No, actually, I've put a few pictures down below. I wasn't sure what questions were going to be asked, but I put a few. There we go. This is Susan's flatworm. This is the flatworm I discovered and named after Susan, my wife. Yeah, and I have to say, many women, if the idea of having a worm named after them might be a bit stressed, but you've got to agree, it's a beautiful worm.
It is
beautiful. If you're going to name a worm after your wife, this is the one. So this is a platyhelminth. It's a flatworm. It belongs to the same group as liver flukes and tapeworms and all those other parasitic nasties. But the whole group of them, a separate group of free living, non-parasitic marine polyclad flatworms, and some of them are quite extraordinarily beautifully coloured. Again, like the sea slugs, the nudibranchs, they feed on toxic things. They become toxic, and they advertise the fact because they don't want to get eaten in half. So with the world expert on tropical green flatworms, a Canadian scientist living in Australia, Dr. Leslie Newman, she and I named this as a new species, Susan's flatworm.
And
Pseudoceros susani.
Susan
Yeah.
delighted?
She was and is, yes.
Great. So no need for flowers or chocolates, just find a good flatworm.
That's the one.
I like the nice comment that Frank White has written here. Very flashy worm to name after your wife.
Very flashy worm. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Frank.
And just when you flick through the images there, a dragonfly came up. You're interested in dragonfly migration, aren't you?
Yeah, I wasn't sure you were going to mention this. Yes, dragonflies. Yeah, so living in the Maldives, I showed a couple of pictures of Maldivian islands. Basically, they're sandbanks. And if you've been to Maldives or you've seen pictures of it, you'll appreciate that there isn't a huge amount of standing fresh water. There's a few ponds, mostly brackish, but there's no great lakes or rivers or streams or waterfalls. And of course, dragonflies require fresh water to complete their life cycle. They lay the eggs, the female lays the eggs into fresh water, the larva hatches out and grows in fresh water, then comes out as the adult, which is what we see. So without fresh water, there are no dragonflies. And yet, every year in October, starting in October, there are thousands, millions of dragonflies suddenly appear. And I noticed that the very first year I went to Maldives, having a great time fishing and going fishing boats and diving and what have you. And then suddenly, boom, dragonflies. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then forgot about it for another year. And then, oh, suddenly dragonflies, and forgot about it for another year. And after several years, it dawned on me something quite special was happening. And talking to Maldivians, they all knew about this, the annual appearance of dragonflies. And as kids, they go around catching them and tying strings to them and doing what little kids do. So every Maldivian knows about dragonflies, but nobody knew where they were coming from. How could they possibly be here? Anyway, to cut a long story short, I started recording arrival dates and different islands and contacting people here, there, and everywhere, and put it together. And yeah, it turns out this is the longest known migration of any insect. It's twice as long as the migration of the monarch butterfly. And it crosses the Indian Ocean, the Western Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, from India to Africa and back again. Quite extraordinary.
Wow, that's amazing. And has any of the research that you have led to any particular conservation outcomes of any of the species that you've been researching? Dragonflies, cetaceans, anything?
That's a good question. Dragonflies, no. I mean, the when I published this paper, I published a paper on my research on dragonflies, founding this theory of hypothesis of migration, and that has actually led to a mini explosion of research on globe skimmer. This is a globe skimmer dragonfly. I mean, it was always known to be a widespread migratory species, but people kind of, I mean, it's not particularly extraordinary. It's an average size and an average color, and it's everywhere. So people tend to ignore, a bit like sparrows, I suppose, house sparrows. People ignore house sparrows or free sparrows until they disappear, and then think, wow, actually, they're quite nice things, and we ought to find out what's going on. Anyway, people had kind of ignored these, but when I published this work, suggesting that this actually had by far the longest migration of any insect, the only known and documented what is the only known transoceanic migration of any insect, then people sat up and took notice. So there's been a mini explosion of research. I wouldn't say it's led to conservation outcomes, but it's certainly much greater understanding. In terms of conservation outcomes in the Maldives, where I work mostly, when I was working for the government of marine research, in collaboration with my immediate boss, a very dynamic, forward-thinking Maldivian, Hassan Malik, who unfortunately died young of a heart attack, but he was still in his 40s. But with him, we were able to protect a number of species, and my work led directly to the legal protection of cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and mantas in the Maldives, and also the selection and designation of the first 15 marine protected areas in the Maldives. These are rather small reef areas, and initially, I have to say, they were little more than paper parks, but it set a precedent for having protected areas. There were none previously in the Maldives, and everything was open to everybody traditionally. So the very concept of marine protected areas was rather alien. But this set a precedent, and since then, the system has grown and expanded and become more effective. So, some first protections for particular species in particular areas. Then what else? Sharks. With another colleague, Huda Ahmed, Maldivian colleague, we carried out the first review of shark fisheries in the Maldives. Sharks, as you'll know, because they grow slowly and reproduce in small numbers, are very prone to overfishing. There was some shark fishing going on in the Maldives, and we carried out the first survey of that. And among other things, we looked at the economic value. This is over 30 years ago, 1992, 93. We looked at the economic value of shark diving in the Maldives. Tourist diving is very important there. And even at that time, it was worth about 5 times as much as the total revenue from shark exports. It's local consumption, it's all for export. And politicians sat up and took notice, and they sat up and took notice and didn't act immediately, but that was the first step. That was definitely the first step on the way, a way that took 18 years to reach its endpoint, if you like, but led to the total protection of sharks in the Maldives. So that was good. And then more recently, that was my work with marine research and government. Then more recently, there's the trips I do. I lead for Naturetrek and other trips I do. I record all the stations and seabirds and other things to see. So in terms of birds, with another colleague, Mohammed Shamal, I recently updated the national list of birds of the Maldives. And directly as a result of that, 104 species of bird were given legal protection by the Ministry of Environment. And also work on our trips, we identified for the first time, again, local fishermen were very well aware, but we identified for the first time, externally, if you like, a seasonal hotspot for lesser noddies, particular type of seabird, which go in thousands in the far north of Maldives in particular season. They don't breed there, they feed there. And as a direct result of that work, which was published, BirdLife International recognized that area as an important bird area, and subsequently the Maldivian government protected the main island, Galandu, where they roost, is now legally protected. And then similarly for cetaceans, they are protected within the Maldives. But as a result of the work I've been doing, again with Mohammed Shamal, my living colleague, through the IUCN Marine Protected Area System, Maldives has been recognized as an important marine mammal area, which gives it some status as contributes towards understanding which and conservation and hopes.
Absolutely fantastic, Chaz. What a custodian of Maldivian life you are. I
Thank
think
you.
people have been knighted for less, so it's fantastic for everything that you've done there. I'd love to ask you more about that, but we've got quite a few questions coming in, which I want to get to. But I do have a couple more questions just to ask you about your career. As we said, we would do this as a little section. I'm wondering, when you first arrived in the Maldives, as a young marine biologist, what was the moment that made you think, I really want to do this for the rest of my life? This is it. I'm in love.
Ah, well, I always wanted to be a biologist. And when I took up diving, I definitely wanted to be a marine biologist. Um, when I was a lad, when I was growing up, I was definitely going to be a polar biologist. I was going to go to the Antarctic. So I studied zoology. I did a PhD. I won a PhD scholarship to do a PhD on krill. And as that was being completed, I applied for and got a job as a krill biologist with the British Antarctic Survey. This was in 1982, which you probably don't remember, but it was immediately before the start of the Falklands War.
No, I was -6.
You remember it well. And Maggie Thatcher cut the budget of the British Antarctic Survey, and my job went just before I started. So I had no job, and I was a penniless student. So I had an opportunity. An opportunity came up to work in the Maldives on a local salary, and I went out to the Maldives. I thought I'll be here for a year or two, and then go back and go to the Antarctic. But anyway, a year or two turned into 3 or 4 or 10 or 20. There were worse places to be.
Totally wrapped.
As a marine biologist, there are definitely worse places.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's a lot warmer. It's a lot warmer than the
Having
Antarctic.
done 7 Maldives cruises with you, I can see why you stayed, and I'm very much looking forward to being out there in 5 or 6 weeks or so with you.
Yeah, not
So
long.
let's move on to some of the questions now that we have been asked. So Joe McGregor is asking, how suitable are these cruises for someone with slightly impaired mobility? So able to walk, climb stairs, get in and out of a car, but slow at all types of physical activity and easily tired by a lot of such activity. I'm happy to answer this, but Chaz, feel free to chip.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. Joan, I would say that because it's a cruise, the beauty of it is that absolutely everything is optional. So if you're fit and able enough with your mobility to walk and climb stairs, then you can be in and out of your cabin and walking around the ship easily. Then that's very easy to step onto the boats that we use to run to the snorkel sites. There's always a smiling helping hand to help you into the boats as well. And everything is optional. So if you want to go snorkeling on either of these trips we've mentioned, just for 10 minutes, you don't need to go. We typically go for an hour, hour and a half. But we can run you back to the boat very easily. So if you go for 10 minutes, have a nice little swim, and then you find you're a little bit tired, would like to go back on deck, sit on a lounger, sip a nice pina colada, and just watch the lovely scenery while everyone else is having a snorkel. That's no problem at all. In terms of the walking, there's very limited walking on the Maldives. We may do an island visit, which is all going to be flat. The topography of the Maldives is, the highest altitude is sort of 3 meters or something like that. You're not going to be doing any big walks. Raja Ampat will be different. Chaz, I'll leave that to you to answer for walking for bird sites and things.
Yeah, Raja Ampat. Well, there's a pre-trip option to go to Pankogo National Park, which is fairly flat, a little bit rugged, but fairly flat. Then on the cruise itself there's a bird excursion at Coffee Hour, which is a little bit rugged, I have to say. Then there's a Yeah, no, there's if you've seen pictures of Raja Ampat, they often show this island, small cast islands, extraordinary scenery, jungle-clad limestone islands. There's a viewpoint. There were steps. There's steps put in. There's about 170 steps. Um,
Yeah.
Again, optional. And then for the birds of paradise, for Wilson's bird of paradise, actually it's a very steep track, and I have walked it, and it's quite rugged. However, we get four-wheel drives, and we go up, and then it's just a couple of 100 yards into the forest.
Great. And thank you, Frank, for your comment that you've put there. You can confirm all staff on board are attentive and that you've been looked after on both trips. That's great, Frank. Thank you. We've had another question from Linda Campbell. In the Maldives, is snorkeling on the surface sufficient to enjoy all that is likely to be seen? Also, what chance to see larger whales? Well, the first part of that question, certainly, these are snorkeling trips, so you can see everything that we're trying to see underwater. You're just going to be snorkeling on the surface. You don't need to be diving or worrying about that at all. And that's where you're going to be seeing everything. The clarity of the water, the visibility is fantastic. 95% of the time, it's a lovely, bright, sunny day. And the visibility is really superb. So great light, gorgeous, colourful fish. Chance to see the larger whales. Of the 7 trips I've personally done, we've seen sperm whales a couple of times, and that's really been it for my experience. We typically tend to see more of from my experience, dolphins, and then the larger animals that are classed in the dolphin family, such as the blackfish, so that the pilot whales and things like that. However, Chaz will have a different experience because he's been out there many more times than I have, and you've seen greater things, haven't you, Chaz?
Yeah, there are large whales at the Maldives. Seasonally, there are blue whales pass through on their migration to and from Sri Lanka. Breeders' whales occur. Humpback whales, pretty rare, but they are there, and sperm whales, a bit offshore. However, I would say if large whales are your priority, then Maldives shouldn't really be your first stop. There are large whales there, but not in huge numbers. What Maldives is great for, cetacean-wise, is the smallest, the medium-sized and smaller cetaceans, which go in large numbers and good diversity. Beaked whales, for example, and all the various delphinids, the dolphins and the blackfish.
Yeah.
And the dwarf sperm whales. I would say Maldives is possibly the best place in the world to see dwarf sperm whales. So if that's high on your list,
Yeah.
gotta do it.
We've another question here. Is coral bleaching a significant problem in Raja Ampat or the Maldives? This is from John Pollitt.
Yes and no. Coral bleaching, yeah, it's happening across the globe. Maldives, yes, it has been bleached moderately badly a couple of years ago. The reefs tend to recover quite quickly. The bleaching is quite patchy, so there still are some fantastic areas. And also, as long as the structure is still there, if the corals haven't broken down, which they haven't, the 3D structure is there, then the fishes and everything else is there. It's still a great place for snorkeling. But yes, there has been some bleaching.
Yeah.
Right, Ampat, no. Now, I wonder if this might come. I have another slide somewhere. Okay, here we go. If you remember this diagram showing the distribution of coral species, the coral triangle, one of the reasons the coral triangle have this enormous diversity of corals is that it is not subject to coral bleaching very often, the mass coral bleaching. And there's a reason for that is that in most years, because of the rotation of the Earth, the spin of the Earth, Coriolis effect, this, that, and the other, currents flow along the equator from South America, all the way across the equator to the Western Pacific, to Papua New Guinea. And as the water flows along there, it gets warmer and warmer and warmer under the hot tropical sun, the equatorial sun. So by the time it gets to the Western Pacific, having traveled all the way from the Eastern Pacific, it is warmer than anywhere else. And oceanographers call this the warm pool, the Western Pacific warm pool. It's a thing. So the corals that live there are used to this. They live in this warm pool and they're very happy there. In El Nino years, you'll be aware, ocean currents in the tropics go simplistically put into reverse. So the warm pool, water from the warm pool flows out along the equator, going all the way back towards South America, Galapagos. The cold Humboldt current is stopped. So over this side, warm water comes this way. Humboldt current stops. So you get the El Nino impact in this part of South America. The anchovies die, everything dies, it's a disaster, and then it all springs back again. And corals get bleached because they don't like the warm water. It's the warm water that causes the coral bleaching. And at the same time, warm water flows from the warm pool down to the Great Barrier Reef. So you'll have seen a lot about bleaching in the last year or so on the Great Barrier Reef. And where does that warm water come from? It comes from the warm pool. It travels down to south to the Great Barrier Reef here. In this part of the world, it actually gets cooler. And the corals aren't overjoyed about it, but it doesn't kill them in the same way that it kills the warm water kills them. So there are issues. There is a little bit of bleaching going on, but not the mass coral bleaching. And the mass bleaching occurs when warm water, the corals get stressed, they kick out their symbiotic algae. The algae that impart that khaki color, you get rid of the algae, you just get left with a transparent coral animal and its white limestone skeleton. You get a bright white coral. It looks like it has been dipped in bleach. That's coral bleaching. So it occurs in areas, this mass bleaching occurs in areas where water from the warm pool spreads in El Nino years. Warm pool gets cooler. I mean, if it got very, very cold, they wouldn't like it, but a couple of degrees cooler, they don't mind at all. So paradoxically, the warmest part of the ocean is not affected by these warming events, or maybe not paradoxically. And Raja Ampat is right there. So no, Raja Ampat has not been impacted by mass coral bleaching.
Thank you, Chaz. One thing I will say, we've got a lot of people still logged on. Our Raja Ampat trip that we've talked about this evening is for 2027. It is full, completely full for 27. But we do have some spaces available for 2026. It goes in a few weeks' time on the 24th of February. So if you're keen to come, then don't miss out. It's full for 27, so you can join Chaz and come along for that in a few weeks' time. Perfect time of year to get away from the winter in the UK. Chaz, another question from Heather Bagg is asking, do you need to pay to stay overnight at a hotel to go to the underwater restaurant? Itha, how do you say this in the Maldives?
Ita means lobster, rock lobster.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Hilton, the Conrad Hilton has an underwater restaurant. Yes, you can't just pitch up and have lunch there. No, you have to be guest at the hotel, at the resort.
Okay, well, that's something that we could arrange for you, Heather, either pre-tour or post-tour. So if you're interested, just let us know. And another question, Christine is asking, what is the advantage for the suckerfish of sticking onto a dolphin?
Who knows? Who knows the mind of the suckerfish? However, they get free ride and they get scraps of food. There are dolphins and whales and sharks are rather messy eaters, so little bits get, and the suckerfish, the mole will dart off and grab a bit of food and come back. Sucker, and he gets transported for nothing. They're very slimy. They produce mucus, which adds to the slipperiness as the slipstream, as they slip through the water. They're particularly slimy things. All fish are slimy. These are more slimy than most. Yeah.
And final question from Carol Chislett is, what are you hearing, to your knowledge, about the impact of climate change on all of these islands? So all of Raja Ampat and Maldives.
Yeah, well, I think right across the tropical Indian and Pacific Oceans, that there are impacts. Slowly sea level rise, which is taking its time, and the coral reef islands can, in theory, at least continue to grow. They're dynamic. Reefs will grow, sand will be produced. So it's not a linear proposition that so much sea level rise equals so much erosion. But nevertheless, in the long term, that is a very serious threat to many of the Indo-Pacific nations. As sea temperatures increase, there will be increasing severity of El Nino events, not necessarily the frequency, because the El Nino phenomenon is divided, is driven in part by temperature differences across the ocean. And if everybody's rising, then temperature difference doesn't necessarily change. But when these things happen, the temperatures are higher, which causes more bleaching. Corals will adapt, but they may adapt over centuries rather than decades, perhaps, which is the timescale we're talking about.
Mm.
Another impact is ocean acidification with increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and therefore increased levels of carbon dioxide in the ocean. Seawater is actually becoming less alkaline. And as a result, it's becoming more difficult for some calcium carbonate depositing creatures, corals and snails, to deposit their skeletons or shells. And this may, in fact, have possibly the greatest impact in the long term for them. And then recently, you'll have seen just a week or two ago, there was a series of 3 tropical cyclones in Sri Lanka and Indonesia, very close to the equator, which has got people very concerned because tropical cyclones, they're natural, they occur, and they require 2 things. They require, or 3 things, heat and moisture, which they get from the warm tropical ocean, but also spin. And spin is imparted by the Coriolis effect, which, as every schoolboy knows, and every listener here knows, is 0 at the equator and increases away from the equator. So as a result, tropical cyclones do not normally occur close to the equator. They never cross the equator. And within 5 degrees, certainly, but normally people say 8 or 10 degrees north and south, you do not get cyclones. And yet here we're 3 at the same time. So something serious is happening. So yeah, increased rainfall associated with increased storms, increased flooding. So huge problems for, and over 1,000 people died. So it's not a nothing. Things are happening.
Mm.
No one knows for sure exactly where it's going to end up, but it's not looking great.
No, but thanks to your amazing work you've done over the last few decades and your continued research that you do, hopefully can continue to do a lot for conservation of the species in these areas, and particularly on our cruises where you're making all of these observations and passing records on to help.
Thank you. I don't think it's going to save the world, but a small step in the right direction.
No, yeah, I think you're doing a good job. Well, it's time for us to wrap up now. So thank you all so much for joining. We're going to have a break from our roadshows now as we turn our attention to Christmas. We'll be back in the new year, kicking off again on the 8th of January, where I'll be back hosting, this time on Australia. A former member of our TaylorMade team who moved to Sydney last year to operate our tours in Australia will be joining me to tell us all about Australian wildlife. So we hope to see you there. Until then, if you have any more questions about the cruises we've covered tonight, I'll be in the office tomorrow, so you're welcome to contact me. And we wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a peaceful New Year, and we'll see you back in January. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone.
and
Happy
good
Christmas.
night. Merry
Bye.
Christmas.